The first book of Maccabees. It's the exciting story of a successful rebellion of the Israelites against their Greek and Syrian oppressors that took place in the 160s BC, also known as the Maccabean revolt. The book was written by an anonymous Jewish historian sometime after the revolt ended, and its title is a Greek pronunciation of the Hebrew word Maccabees, which means hammer. This was a nickname of one of the revolt's leaders, Judah the Hammer, or in Greek, Judas Maccabeus. The book was originally written in Hebrew, though it wasn't ever considered part of the Hebrew Bible. That's why later Jewish and Protestant Christian traditions don't include it in their Bible. But an old Greek translation was made, and it was widely read and valued in Greek-speaking Judaism and in many communities of the early Jesus movement. That's why 1 Maccabees is part of the Deuterocanon in Roman Catholic and Orthodox Bibles. The book can be divided into 5 movements. It begins with the rise of oppressive empires in the ancient East who subjugate the Israelites, and then that leads up to the revolt. Then the following 3 movements are focused on 3 leaders of the revolution. First, Judah, then Jonathan, and finally, Simon. Let's dive in and see how it works. The story begins with the famous Macedonian warrior king named Alexander the Great, who took the Mediterranean world by storm. Before his death, he divided his kingdom among his lifelong friends, called in Greek the diadokoi, which means successors. One of these diadokoi led to a family called the Seleucids, who ruled over Syria and produced a power-hungry ruler named Antiochus IV, who was bad news. Not only did he seize power over Israel, but he teamed up with certain Israelites that the author calls renegades. These are Jewish people who abandoned Israel's covenant with God and began assimilating into the cultures of the surrounding nations. Antiochus eventually came to Jerusalem himself. He pillaged the temple treasury, and he then decreed that everyone under his rule should abandon their traditional religion and family culture and conform to his. Many faithful Israelites refuse, and they are brutally killed, and we read, very great wrath came upon Israel. At this point, a man named Mattathias enters the story with his 5 sons, John, Simon, Judah, Eleazar, and Jonathan. They move away from Jerusalem to a town called Modi'in, where they lament over the state of Israel and how Israel's God is being dishonored in the temple. Then officials from Antiochus come to Modi'in, and they extend the king's friendship to Mattathias if he will offer a sacrifice to gods other than the God of Israel. Mattathias refuses, and he declares that he and his sons will remain faithful to their covenant with Israel's God. But another Israelite comes and tries to offer that sacrifice, so Mattathias kills him, a lot like the zealous Phinehas in the Torah. And so the revolution begins. They win many victories in the revolt's early years, and the chapter concludes with an old Mattathias speaking his final words to his sons, encouraging them to remain faithful to the covenant. He appoints Judah as a commander of the revolutionary army, and he advises his sons to listen to the wisdom of Simon. Then Mattathias dies, and all Israel grieves his death. After this, Judah the Hammer takes charge. He's honored with an opening poem where he's described like a lion in battle, a lot like the biblical Judah was in Genesis 49. Judah defeats many Syrian leaders and allies, like Apollonius of Samaria, whose sword Judah takes and uses in the rest of his battles, a lot like David did with Goliath's sword. Antiochus is furious when he hears about the revolt's success, so he appoints an official named Lucius to oversee Judea and put down the revolt. But Judah defeats him, and as Lucius's army retreats, Judah takes Israel to Jerusalem, where they capture the city and restore the temple. There, they purify and rededicate the temple, an event celebrated annually ever since, known as Hanukkah, which in Hebrew means dedication. After this come more stories of Judah's victories over Antiochus's armies and over some of Israel's ancient hostile neighbors like Edom and Ammon to the east. And the name of Judah and his brothers was honored by all Israel and the nations around them. But when Antiochus hears that his power over Israel has been shattered by Judah, he becomes so distraught and sick that he dies. And after a battle of rivals for the throne, Antiochus IV's son, named Antiochus V, seizes power. He recommissions Lucius to defeat Judah's army, leading up to the Battle of Bet Zechariah. Judah's brother Eleazar is killed in the fierce battle by a war elephant, but Judah fights Antiochus V to a standstill. When Antiochus sees that he cannot win, he proposes a peace treaty, and the war is over for now. But then Antiochus V is overthrown by his cousin Demetrius I. And remember those renegade Israelites? They are led by a treacherous Israelite named Alchemist, who goes to Demetrius saying he will ally with him to defeat Judah if he gives him an army and makes Alchemist Israel's new high priest. Demetrius agrees, and so he appoints his friend Bacchides to rule Judea with Alchemist. And he sends bigger and bigger armies until Judah knows he's in trouble. And at the Battle of Mount Azotus, Judah is killed, and all Israel grieves over him. After Judah's death, more Israelite renegades appear, and Bacchides gives them authority over Judea. But the soldiers of Judah go and ask his brother Jonathan to become their new leader. He agrees and allies with his brother Simon, and they launch a rebellion against Bacchides, and they eventually win. We learn that Alchemist dies a mysterious death when he starts tearing down part of the temple in a renovation project, and Bacchides, seeing that he just can't win against these brothers, gives up, and he brokers a peace treaty. And so it seemed like all was well until things get complicated. A new rival arises to take Syria's throne from King Demetrius, Alexander Epiphanes, another son of Antiochus IV, and he offers Jonathan a lot of money and power and the role of Israel's high priest. Jonathan agrees, and he allies with Alexander, and then he oversees the fortification of Jerusalem as a free city. After this comes a long period of rival rulers fighting each other, like rulers do, and Jonathan finds a way to survive and stay in power until his luck runs out. A Syrian leader named Trypho, who's scheming to seize the throne, needs Jonathan out of the way. So he tricks Jonathan into a meeting and then ambushes and imprisons him. And when all of Israel hears about this, they grieve. So Simon is now the last of the brothers, and he's accepted as Israel's new leader. Trypho ends up executing the imprisoned Jonathan, but instead of trying to fight Trypho, Simon goes around him by sending to the new king of Syria, Demetrius II. He asks that Judea become an independent nation. And after all the years of violent resistance, his request is granted. And so it was in the year 142 BC that Simon became king and high priest of a free Israel, and the yoke of the nations was removed from Israel. After this come the glory days. There's a long poem that praises Simon as a leader for bringing peace, abundance, and honor to the temple in Jerusalem. But then, after Simon grows old and appoints his sons, John, Judah, and Mattathias, to lead Israel in his place, Simon is betrayed by his power-hungry son-in-law Ptolemy, the governor of Jericho, who tries to seize power by inviting old Simon and his sons to a party, getting them drunk, and then murdering them. But Ptolemy's plan fails. Simon's other son, John Hyrcanus I, finds out about Ptolemy's treachery, and he gets revenge. Then he takes up the role of Israel's leader and the high priesthood. John builds on the freedom gained by his father, and Israel continues on as an independent nation for the next 100 years, until the arrival of a new power, the Roman Empire. This 100-year Israelite kingdom is known as the Hasmonean kingdom, named after Hasmonean, the great-grandfather of Mattathias, with whom our story began. The book of Maccabees was written by a royal historian in the Hasmonean court to support the claim that God raised up this family to rescue and lead Israel. And while the sons of Mattathias are often compared to Israel's ancient biblical heroes like Joshua or Gideon or David, God is rarely mentioned in 1 Maccabees. Most of the victories are credited to the wisdom and power of Mattathias' sons. And this is different from the battle narratives that highlight God's power to deliver, like the ones you find in the Hebrew Bible or in the parallel account of the revolt in 2 Maccabees. We also know that not all Israelites celebrated the Hasmonean kingdom. The group that produced the famous Dead Sea Scrolls consisted of exiled Israelite priests who thought the Hasmoneans were the renegades leading Israel astray. First Maccabees was written in a time when Israel had fractured into rival groups, each one claiming that they were the ones being faithful to Israel's God. And so First Maccabees is an important witness to the struggle experienced by God's people when they live in violent and unstable times. It can be so hard to know where God is at work and who really acts or speaks for God. The Hasmonean kingdom lasted 100 years before it fell to the Roman Empire. But God's faithful people endured through all of that, waiting for God's kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven. So First Maccabees reminds us that while human kingdoms come and go, it's only God's kingdom that lasts forever. And that's what the book of First Maccabees is all about.